Going on? You're listening to the Survival Skills Podcast, or you're watching if you're watching this on YouTube. My name is Gray Jabesi, and I am your host. The Survival Skills Podcast is where we explore survival skills for the 21st century, and mental health is definitely one of those things that we need to discuss, and we have never really discussed before on this channel. So I brought Dr. Sindi. Some of you know her from Twitter. She has over 250,000 followers. And the subject of today is mental health. So a full disclaimer, I am very ignorant on this subject, and this is exactly why I decided to reach out to her and discuss the topic. I've pretty much been following her, and she talked about this a lot on her Twitter. And I just wanted to bring it within so that I can be able to ask questions. So you might find maybe some of the questions that I ask may sound insensitive to some of you who are more knowledgeable on this subject, but this is coming from a real place of curiosity. I was really just trying to ask questions, and I know there are other people out there like me who probably have the same questions or they haven't figured it out. So I hope you enjoy it. If you're listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or any other listening platforms, be sure to also check out our YouTube channel, Survival Skills Podcast. We have video content on there. If you're watching on video, be sure to also subscribe on the podcasting apps, because that's where you can get notified whenever we release a new episode. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, be sure also to leave me a 5-star review. That would be very much appreciated. Will help us grow the podcast. Otherwise, enjoy my conversation with Dr. Sindi, and I wish you a great day, evening, depending on when you're watching or listening to this. Thank you. So welcome to Survival Skills Podcast. I think the subject of mental health itself is actually a survival skill these days.
Yeah.
So I think I would like to talk about that today. And maybe we should start with introducing yourself and what you've been doing.
Okay, so my name is Dr. Sindi Van Zyl. Van Zyl is not my maiden name. I'm married into the Van Zyl family. My maiden name is Mahamba Sitole. I'm 44 years old. I was born in Harare, Zimbabwe. I've always wanted to be a doctor, so I knew from a very young age that I'm going to be a doctor. And I took a long route. So I did a BSc for 4 years, and then I did medicine after that. So I was at varsity for about 10 years. And then my dream came true. And so I'm very happy. I'm very content with life, because I think for me, the two main dreams that I had was to become a doctor and also to be on radio. So those two things have happened. So, as far as contentment goes, you won't meet a person as content as I am. I'm so content. I'm very happy with the way my life has turned out. And whatever else happens in my life, all of those other things are bonuses from God. But generally, I'm happy to be a doctor. I'm happy to be on radio. I'm happy to use social media, my platform, as a platform to share medical related knowledge, because that's really what I'm all about. I'm all about sharing knowledge that can help people make decisions about their health.
And congratulations for living your dream life, as you used to think about. It takes a lot of work to do that. So on the mental health part, this is a subject that I've been fascinated with for some time.
Yeah.
But I haven't been able to sort of understand at a very best level to where I could say, I get it. What is considered mental health?
So when you look at the human body, right, we have a heart, right? The heart it makes sure that there's oxygen being pumped around the body. We have our lungs that make sure that when the oxygen is pumped around our body, when the blood is pumped around our body, there's an exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen, and that happens across the lungs. So we breathe in oxygen, we breathe in air, and there's this exchange and we stay alive. Then you also have your brain. So your brain produces hormones, and those hormones have an impact on how you function on a daily basis. So when you're in puberty, you have the sexual hormones that are released into your body, and then your voice starts breaking. If you're a guy, maybe your Adam's apple starts growing. If you're a girl, maybe your breasts start growing. So there's hormones that affect your development. But we also have hormones that are what we call neurotransmitters, and these hormones have an impact on your mental health. Right? So mental health is anything to do with your brain and your functioning, your daily functioning as a human being. So depression, and I'll speak about depression because that's what I'm living with, and this is what I can explain easily because I'm living with depression. So we have hormones that we what we call our happy hormones. So there's dopamine and there's serotonin, right? So when those hormones are imbalanced in your brain, right, you then you're not functioning properly. So when those hormones are balanced in your brain, you're a functional human being. So you're motivated to wake up in the morning and do stuff. You're in a good mood. You eat properly. You sleep properly. You just generally, your mood is stable. You're happy, and so on. But once there's an imbalance of those hormones, those happy hormones in your brain, then we start having problems. And so what leads a person to having an imbalance of those hormones? Most times it's life stresses. So life is hard. We all know that. I think when we're young, you don't realize how hard life is until you're grown up and you see it. Oh my gosh, when your mom said she had no money for shoes for you, she really had no money for those shoes. But you don't realize those things until you're older. So some of the life stresses, most times you can get through them just by looking at a situation, dealing with it, and moving on. But sometimes the life stresses are too much and they start depleting those happy hormones in your brain, right? And so when I describe this to patients, I always say to them, think of a bucket. So if your bucket of happy hormone is full, you're functioning. If it's on half, you know that something is wrong. But if you just, if you meditate or you pray or you cry or you go exercise and so on, it'll help. But once the bucket gets to a certain level, you need a professional intervention, right? So in my case, and I'll talk about myself because it's easy to do that. In 2013 in April, I had a mental breakdown. But prior to that, it was a long journey of my bucket getting emptier and emptier and emptier. And mind you, I was already married. I had the 2 kids. I had everything. From the outside, you'd look into my life and think, wow, Dr. Sindi's life is really going well. But on the inside, I was not okay. And I knew that something was wrong, right? And so I'd speak to a few friends here and there. But because of the fact that I'm a medical doctor, because I'm married, I've got 2 kids, society, and I'll say this generally because I want people to understand why it's difficult for people to speak about mental illness issues. If your life looks like it's going fine, right? Society can't place you. They can't understand why you'd say you're depressed when people are looking in, they see that your life is fine. So I'd speak to my mom and my aunt and tell them, I'm not okay. And their whole thing was, but why? Because you're a Christian, you're married, you're a doctor, you've got 2 beautiful kids, what's going on? And yet I was still empty. So I eventually had a mental breakdown. And I needed to be admitted into a mental hospital because I needed help. I needed to be helped by a psychiatrist. I needed to be helped by a psychologist. And then, of course, I needed all the other help, like the medication and so on. And so that is what mental illness is. And I think the hardest thing for people, and I'm happy that you're so honest about how you don't really understand it, but you want to understand it. We are happy to see a person with a cut on their arm. We're happy to see a person with a broken leg because we know what to fix. But the moment someone speaks about a mental illness or having a problem like I'm depressed or I'm not feeling okay, I'm feeling sad and so on, because we can't see it, it's difficult for us to understand it. And it's even worse for the Black community because we don't even have the words. We don't even have the words for depression. I don't know what the word for depression is in Shona. I don't know what the word for depression is in isiZulu. I don't, because I've never heard anyone say that. But I do know when people say, oh, that person, that person, right, those slurs, we all know the slurs. But we haven't actually identified the proper words to describe mental health and mental illness. So that's what mental health is. It's looking at the functioning of your brain, looking at those hormones and seeing, what's going on. And so there's depression, there's bipolar mood disorders, there's schizophrenia, there's a whole range of mood disorders, there's anxiety, there's panic attacks. All of those things have to do with your brain. And many times you need help from a professional. But now, if you don't know what's wrong with you, if you can't articulate it, if you can't put it into words, how are you going to get help?
So that's a very good place to start already. And to the listeners out there, I will play the devil's advocate. Number one, because of my ignorance on the subject.
That's good. No, I'm happy. And that's why we're having this conversation.
And number two, also because, I represent everyone else out there who,
yes,
you're actually saying that, they don't understand exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
So the question that I have first is, where do you draw the line between, you say, you've got hormones that allow you to be able to wake up in the morning and do what you got to do.
Yes. Yes.
So you might also not be able to do that when you're not depressed. So
Yes.
when do you actually draw the line between having the courage to do something and
Yes.
having to identify it as mental illness, for example? Because it's a
Okay.
very blurry line there.
It is, no, definitely. I'm happy that you've asked that question. So when your situation starts having a debilitating effect on your life, then you know that there's something wrong. And I'll give an example. I mean, when you're at university, right, and you know there's an exam coming up, you might just feel like, you know what, I don't feel like studying, and then you don't study. And then, when you're meant to wake up in the morning and study, you don't do it. And that's just laziness or whatever else. But once something persists and starts affecting your day-to-day living, then we know that we have a problem. So when I look at myself and my situation, I was a manager at work. So I had to wake up in the morning and be at work on time. So I can't tell people not to come to work late when I'm coming to work late. But I used to wake up in the morning and start crying because I didn't know what to wear. I couldn't make decisions about what to wear. I had a wardrobe full of clothes. I'd sit in front of my clothes and I'd cry. So my husband would have to choose clothes for me. And then I had to go to work. But now for me to go to work, the motivation to go to work wasn't there. So now imagine I'm an employee, I'm a manager, I must be at work on time before everybody else, but I'll be sitting on my bed crying. And sometimes I get to work at 10:30. Like how do you make that make sense? So when it starts affecting your life, to the extent that it's now affecting your, if you have a job, it's affecting your job. If you have a family, it's affecting your family life. Then we know that there's something wrong. And the example I always give to people is that I'm a social butterfly, right? I love going out. So if there's a wedding or there's anything, just, my friends knew that Sindi will make sure that, she's there. But I missed one of my best friend's weddings. I woke up in the morning, I showered, I got dressed, and I got back into the blankets. I missed her wedding. And that was a major red flag. So yes, you can have day-to-day issues. There's day-to-day laziness, there's day-to-day anxiety, there's day-to-day general issues. But the moment it starts affecting your life, the moment you stop enjoying the things that you used to enjoy, the moment you stop doing the things that you normally used to do, then we have a problem.
That's the way you have explained it now. It makes more sense that if you're starting to feel like this is what I would want to be doing and I can't even do it, and I'm sad when I don't do it, then that's where the problem comes. You brought up a point saying, problems, having some issues in your life can deplete your bucket of happiness, right?
Yes.
So I would like to, what would be an ideal circumstance or life that one should have to say that, you have a life that maybe is exempt from having depression or to lead into mental illness? Because from someone like myself who practices Stoicism, I don't know if you ever heard of this.
Mm-hmm. But you can explain it again.
Okay, yeah. So Stoicism is just it's a very old practice.
Yes.
Yeah, it was very it became popular by Seneca back in the day. And it's the idea of, it's a state of mind of saying that each state is okay. There's no good or bad. It is what it is. Much like looking at life from nature's perspective, because the sun does not say today is a bad day or it's a good day.
Yeah.
It shines, right?
It just gets up and it does its thing.
Right, exactly. So now what sort of circumstance should one have in their life to say this is a problem-free life? Because it's very hard to say, you everybody got problems, but then it's hard to say, is your problem the worst in the world?
Because I'm a medical doctor, I generally deal with people's problems every day. So people trust their doctors with their lives. I mean, people tell us the most horrific stories, knowing that we won't tell anybody else. So in terms of problems, the way the world is structured, the way life is structured, we are all going to face problems. Yeah. But we all have different thresholds, right? So something that will make you snap might not make me snap. And you don't know that until you're in the situation, right? But we do know that there's certain things that happen in people's lives that have, when those things happen, and I mean, the psychiatrists have got a scale, right? They know that if a person, for example, loses a loved one, if a person goes through a divorce, if a person moves house, if a person loses their job, there's certain things that we know that doesn't matter how strong you are, right? You are going to be impacted in some way, right?
Right.
And then, of course, the thing happens and most people can bounce back and be okay. But obviously, if you aren't able to bounce back and be fully okay, then we have a problem, right? So life is problematic. There's no two ways about it. I don't know any person who's living a life where there are no issues. But the issue is, are you able to handle those life stresses? And this is where I feel that psychologists really play a big role. And when I look at my own life, I'm a type A personality. I'm a perfectionist, right? So for me, it's all or nothing. You're either doing it in this way or you're not doing it at all. But you can't live going through life like that because not everybody subscribes to my way of thinking that if you're a medical doctor and you see a patient, you must do things perfectly the first time around. Not all doctors are like that. And so with a person like me, one thing that came through in therapy was that I needed to be more chilled out, for lack of a better word. I needed to relax more and just accept that, okay, it's okay if things don't go my way. If things don't go my way, how can I navigate that situation and still get something done? So I would, if something didn't go my way, I'd throw a tantrum and I'd throw in the towel. But therapy taught me that, listen, life won't always go your way. So when you're faced with a situation, count to 10, take a deep breath, and then start playing out all the different possible endings to the scenario in front of you. And that's what I've had to learn to do, right? I was in therapy for about 4 years, and therapy taught me to take a deep breath, count to 10, ask myself, will I die? Is this situation going to kill me? No, it's not. How can I make this ending a better ending than what my heart is telling me? And so that's what I needed to do. So we're all different. We all have different temperaments. There's some people who are just really chilled out about life. I'm not. I'm highly strung. But I've learned to calm down. I've learned to slow down and take things easy. So I hope that kind of answers your question, that it just depends on your background, your personality. And so psychologists are able to look at you and figure out what kind of a person you are and then feed into you things that are going to help you cope better with situations.
Awesome. So I like that you say, people have different thresholds in terms of how they can handle different matters, in their brain. That's great because, the brain is an organ just like any other part of the body. So if one can train, and if I train and get ripped, get a six-pack, pretty much everybody can do that. People can lose weight, people can gain weight. Is it possible to train yourself to become mentally strong?
Okay, so I can see where you're going. So I think what you're trying to say, that are we able to build resilience? I'm not really sure about that, but what I do know is that some of the happiest people that I know are people who have very clear boundaries about who's who in their lives and what they can or cannot do. That much I've picked up. Because I've now started looking more at boundaries, and I've learned that, okay, people that can say no, Sindi, I can't help you. No, I will not do that. They're happy. They sleep well at night because everyone then understands, which, oh, okay, Sindi is that kind of a person. So people won't come to you with ridiculous requests.
That's true.
But if people know that you're kind, they take advantage of that kindness. So seriously, the happiest people I know are people whose boundaries are clear and whose boundaries are well known to everybody in their circles. So you won't have the audacity to demand something from that person that they wouldn't give. And those people are happy because they sleep at night, because they're not confused about any. They don't feel guilty about stuff because it is what it is. Take me as I am, and that's it.
Okay, so I like that you mentioned kindness. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit. So when you say kindness, how do you define kindness? Because I think in most cases, we put it in a category that, like you say, if somebody wants help, well, you have to help them with what they want. And sometimes saying no, in my perspective, doesn't necessarily mean not being kind. It could mean that, you rationalize the situation and you realize that maybe the needful thing to do is probably to say no in that situation, which would come across as unkind on the other side. So in that circumstances, say in pure sense, what would you consider kindness? Because in some cases, people that are very kind, it's like if somebody asks me for extra money when I know that they will spend it on drugs or whatever. Am I being kind, or I'm just being selfish to feel good about the situation to myself when I know that it's not even going to help the other person?
So you actually just summed it up very nicely. People like me who have a very general idea of what kindness is aren't able to sit and think things through rationally. when someone asks for help, our guts wants us to just jump and do the thing without actually thinking to ourselves, are we enabling that person? Are we putting that person into a vulnerable situation? Are we even helping? Right? I needed to learn how to ask myself, okay, if I do that, am I actually making the situation better? Am I helping by interfering? And so the way you're able to rationalize and think to yourself, okay, if I give that person money, they're going to go and do A, B, C, D. It might not benefit them. I don't have that thought process. I had to learn that in therapy. So my idea of kindness is very noble, right? Because I want to help everybody, but it's not always rational. And that's the difference.
That's true. I see this a lot, especially in what we call here black tax, where the people are trying to help their family, and eventually it drains them out, because it becomes an enabling situation where it causes
exactly.
You mentioned about the rat race of work at the beginning before we started recording. Yeah. So there is an increase of people interested in the idea of spirituality and happiness. And in my personal experience, what I've learned is that maybe even happiness is not the goal. I think personally what I need is freedom and peace of mind. Let me just put it as peace, and then happiness pretty much comes from there. And I've seen that, freedom is something that's probably the most expensive thing in our time right now, because, you've got work and stuff like this. So in the mental health issue, based from what I've read, a lot of stress for a lot of people today is coming from work, right? Maybe the jobs they don't like, doing things that they don't enjoy. But I think, don't you think there is a lack of, say, narrative or some sort of information that talks about this issue and say, hey, if you maybe want to be happy, and then maybe the working full time for someone else is not ideal for you, because, you can do all these other things on the side, yoga and all the other things just to cope with the situation. But if you're still returning to the initial source of the problem, it ain't going to solve anything.
Well, I think the challenge here is that it's hard being Black in this world.
Right.
That's actually it. It's hard being a Black person in this world. And I think many of us come from backgrounds where our families, our parents, our caregivers, our grandparents, all they wanted was for us to have better lives than they had, right? So when you look back on your life, you look at what your grandparents went through for your parents to have some form of an education. You look at what your parents went through for you to have some form of an education. When you are eventually done with education, the expectation is that you're going to leap off, just jump and make something of your life, right? So we have a lot of pressure that we don't really always speak about it, but being Black is difficult, right? And so many times when we make decisions about our careers, about what we want to do with our lives, we're making decisions they're loaded decisions. There's an expectation, a very heavy expectation that, okay, because I did A, B, C, D for you, and I made sure that you went to the best schools, that you speak very good English and so on, you must now make something of your life and then in turn pay it forward or pay it back, right? So we come into the world as Black people very burdened. And I say this because I'm married into an Afrikaans family, I'm married to a white man, and most of the stresses that I face as a Black person, my husband, he understands them because he's married to me. So we speak about it all the time, but he hasn't had most of the problems that I've had to face as a Black person. He's had to understand what Black tax is. He's had to learn about being the first of whatever in your family, the first doctor, the first graduate, the first this. They don't always go through that, right? So we are under pressure. And I think maybe our kids will be better. I think our kids are more free than what we were, but we certainly feel the burden of having to rise to the occasion because of the people that came before us, who did everything to make sure that we have a fighting chance in this world. So it's quite a painful situation. I think our kids will have it better. That's what I can say.
Yeah, that's very deep. And I wonder what you have done personally to sort of to change or break that cycle, so to speak. It's like, what kind of messaging do you have to give do you give to your kids to make sure that that imbalance is never there? Is it something that you talk about, or you just
Oh yeah.
into okay?
So yeah, so obviously, I mean, I had my dreams and aspirations about my own kids, and I realized that I was doing exactly what was done to me. So I wanted my daughter to be a ballerina, a professional ballerina, and I wanted my son, to I mean, just recently I wanted him to do piano lessons. He did them for a short while, then he was like, nah, I don't like this, I'm done. Right? My daughter, I think it was 2 years ago, woke up one day, she's like, you know what, I'm done with ballet, and she's very good at it. She's like, I don't want to do ballet, I want to be a YouTuber. So my daughter wants to be a YouTuber. My son wants to be a farmer. Some days he wants to be a YouTuber as well. But they love YouTube. They love their iPads, and they spend a lot of time on their iPads playing Minecraft and so on. So I've had to sit back and take a deep breath and say, you know what? Let them be whatever they want to be. If they want to be YouTubers and make money from it, then so be it. Then my kids will be YouTubers. But I had my own ideas about how I wanted them to be, and I'm glad I'm learning this lesson. It's not an easy lesson, but I'm happy to be learning a lesson of not pressurizing them to be what I want them to be.
And so, what can you share to others in terms of people that are in maybe straight have anxiety problems or
Yeah.
depressed? What kind of practical advice can you give them to take? Sort of things that are free, perhaps, besides
Yeah.
seeing, a doctor or a psychiatrist.
And I'll speak for young people, because I'm sure a lot of young people are going to watch this. Young people are under a lot of pressure to do certain things in a certain time, right? So there are these timelines that, by the age of 30, I must have done this. By the age of this, I must have done that, right? And what I really want to say to you guys is that it actually doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter if you finish your degree in record time. It doesn't matter if you have to repeat subjects. It doesn't matter if you do a degree and you fail it and do something else. It actually doesn't matter. As long as you have a dream that you want to fulfill, and you fulfill it however long the journey is, that's all that matters. But now, we live in a world that's always looking to see, who's doing what, and when did you do it, and how are you doing it, and so on. So try and be like a race horse. The horses, when the ones that do professional racing,
Yeah.
when they come out, they're wearing blinkers, because the jockey just wants the horse to focus, on the finish line.
Yeah.
So if there's one thing I want you guys to remember, is just wear your blinkers. Don't look and see Uti, oh, Sindi Van Zyl, oh my gosh, what is Sibongile doing? No, just focus on your race. Your race, your lane, stay in your lane, maintain your velocity, and that's all you have to do.
Well, it's interesting because, the things that you mentioned are exactly what the majority of us in the Black community are the cues of, say, success.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't really matter. I drive a Toyota Corolla, right? I'm a medical doctor and I drive a Toyota Corolla. Why? Because first of all, I can't afford a Mercedes Benz, right? And even if I did get one, I still scratch my car. Well, sometimes when I park, I bump something, and then my car has a scratch. Now imagine scratching a Mercedes Benz. At least my Corolla, it's paid off. I don't mind scratching it. Okay, maybe I'll be a bit upset and I can wipe the scratch. But now if I had to scratch a Mercedes Benz, oh my gosh, how much would it cost me to fix it? So I always use that as an example of Gucci. It doesn't really matter. As long as you get from A to Z. Yes, I want a Mercedes Benz, but it's not going to happen now. It's going to happen when the time is right.
Yeah, that's actually what you're mentioning about consumerism there. It's actually also a self-defeating thing. It's actually, if it's not right, if it's not done right, it usually ends up badly for people, especially right now.
Exactly. And you end up in debt, and you end up, in a messy situation. So just don't worry about that. If you're still living at home and you're 30, it's okay. I would love to be living at home. I wish my mom was still alive and I'd be living at home, because at least I got to eat her food. But now I must spend money on groceries and it's so expensive. So don't worry about all of those things. If you're living at home, you are saving money. I'm happy for you, If you're not buying new clothes every month, it's okay. Wear what you have. The time will come for you to do all of those things. So that's
awesome.
How I feel people must look, start managing their anxieties and so on.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. This was a fantastic episode on mental health.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.